Well, my editing skills are crap, but can the same thing be said about Onward? Stick around and find out. Hey, I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. This is my uncut review of Onward. The synopsis on IMDb reads, set in a suburban fantasy world, two teenage elf brothers, Ian and Barley Lightfoot, go on and journey to discover if there is still a little magic left out there in order to spend one last day with their father, who died when they were too young to remember him. All right, what is this animal? Well, as you might guess from watching one of the trailers, it's a family movie / kids movie with some layers for adults, as many Pixar movies are. It leverages D&D-ish games and game settings and fantasy elements, but with a very family-friendly, sugar-saturated coating over the whole thing. Lots of light comedy in this movie that completely fell flat for me. It had one D&D-ish action / adventure sequence, and I wanted about 3 or 4 more minimum. But most of kind of like the elements of the quest they had to get, to get through in order to reach their destination, to be able to spend some time with their dad, were kind of pedestrian, like having to fool the police or having to deal with a pixie biker gang and stuff like that. And these weren't really serious threats. They weren't the kinds of things you would associate with a quest. There were some puzzle elements like, that reminds me a little bit of a game of D&D or a fantasy RPG video game, with some light puzzle elements that they had to overcome. But as far as like action, there was no really combat with monsters. They had to run from one monster, and I wish they would have, since they were obviously drawing from those aesthetics, and one of the main characters is a huge fantasy tabletop gamer. I wish they would have leaned into some of those tropes, some of the more action, and if they could get away with it, combat-oriented tropes. Now, maybe because it's Pixar and they want it to be a family movie and they want to keep a PG rating, maybe they just didn't feel like they could lean into the combat. I think there would have been ways for them to lean into and have combat encounters and have it still be rated PG. For Pete's sake, back in the 80s, there was a Dungeons & Dragons Saturday morning cartoon, and that had a lot more, this makes me want to go watch that. That had a lot more action and combat and stuff in it than this movie did. And since it was so, you might say, well, Peter, why are you expecting that? You shouldn't expect that from this kind of movie. I only expect that, or I feel like I want more of it, maybe I should say, because of how much they leaned into evoking a D&D tabletop fantasy world vibe with the nature of the movie and the backdrop of this tabletop game being a major component in terms of how one character views their quest, so I wish they would have gone a little further leaning in that direction, since they were already leaning into it. It left me really actually with just an itch to enjoy a fantasy movie or game, even a kind of a bad one, like some of the Dungeons and Dragons movies that are like cheap, or like the Mythica series. These are not great movies at all. In fact, they are arguably bad by certain measurements. But they certainly dive into that gaming fantasy aesthetic and don't apologize at all for that. And it really scratches that itch if you want to see that kind of world realized in a passive, movie or TV kind of experience. And so it actually left me wanting to come home and watch one of those things, or fire up, an Elder Scrolls game, or play some Pathfinder the Adventure card game, or do something in that had that crunchy, gamey, old school dungeon crawling vibe, since it seemed to tease that but not really fulfill on that kind of expectation for me. The dramatic moments, though, I have to say, all worked well. I didn't laugh at any of the humor, and I was bored a lot of the time, but there were these moments of drama that really I found genuinely moving. They were built on the relationship between these two brothers as they're on this quest together, and also their unresolved feelings about their dad, who died when they were very, very young. And I found those moments very moving. I wish it could have been just a short film about those moments, with maybe just a little bit of the quest and adventure and all the comedy sliced right out of it, Now, I have seemingly a cold, dead heart when it comes to comedy. I don't laugh at the same things that other people people laugh at, but I wouldn't be surprised if other people who normally laugh at, say, Pixar movies that are made for families and stuff, if they would agree that, oh, this wasn't as funny for them either. The dialogue, the writing, it wasn't really, it didn't strike me as clever or interesting. It relied a lot on just kind of slapstick physical comedy of these animated characters instead of having a script with a dialogue that was really interesting. So lots of boredom for me, left me wanting to play a fantasy game with spurts of feeling genuine emotion is how I would sum up what I felt about the story and the execution of it. But let's talk about the cast just briefly. Chris Pratt and Tom Holland were fine, but other than being celebrity names, I don't know what their voices brought that a non-famous career voice actor couldn't have brought, and maybe brought more effectively. Pratt in particular felt odd as a fantasy game fanatic who is also an exuberant, charismatic, almost Jack Black-esque rocker or something. I don't know. He did not at all evoke any hardcore tabletop gamers that I've ever met in my life, and I've played with a lot of them over the years. But a lot of that might also have been the script and the voice direction, and just kind of the general direction of the character that the filmmakers chose to take, which just didn't really connect with me. As far as the visuals go, it's Pixar quality animation, but it's also that Pixar sugarcoating that, you've come to expect in other Pixar movies. The script also didn't provide many moments for the visuals to truly cut loose with the potential of a game-inspired fantasy setting. So a bit disappointing in that regard, even though it doesn't represent like a lower bar for Pixar per se. As far as themes that might trigger some worthwhile thought or conversation, there's a subtle affirmation in the script for following your gut, which, is basically the same as following your heart, and I always find that, groan-inducing. But it's very subtle. I think the biggest theme is related to the family relationships that are so central to the story, between that specifically of brothers, and how in the wake of losing a really important loved one, other family relationships are so vital to helping, or at least beginning to fill the void that's left behind. So I think that it could be very thought-provoking, very moving, could bring about some cathartic reflection and thought for people in regard to those areas of life that many of us have experienced or will experience at some point. Now, I have no idea what your tastes are in movies, but if I were a time traveler, I'd go back in time and say, Peter, definitely don't rent this one, or don't see this in theaters. You could consider renting this one at some point when it's family movie night in the Franson house, and you have to sit through a movie for the kids, for the boys, and something that prioritizes something that they will enjoy. Of the options out there, this one will be painfully boring for you for a lot of the movie, but it will be less painful than so many of the alternatives. So it's maybe not quite a halfway point for something they'll enjoy and you'll enjoy, but it'll be a lot less painful than the other options. Otherwise, and it might even lead to like some gaming with your boys or something afterward. But otherwise, this is not anything you need to remotely give any attention to suit your own fancies. It has an MPAA rating of PG for action, peril, and some mild thematic elements. Right now I'd like to take some time to write a tune for pre-made rhyme. The lyrics kind of never change, but the melody gets rearranged. I never know what I'll create. I'm trying to evoke kind of a choral thing here. I'll never know what I'll create to say how much I appreciate Brian Franklin, Gabriel Stinson, Colin Wright, Lee Bray, Olin D. Branham, Stefan Kremick, and Winston Crutchfield. Thank you for supporting me, and SPP and CGC. And now to all who hear this tune, thank you as well. Please come back soon. Want to hear your name in song? Check out our page on Patreon. Was that even remotely like some kind of a lilting choral fantasy kind of, I don't know, that was terrible. I'm sorry that I inflicted that on you, but I do appreciate my patrons very, very much. Those are my thoughts. I'd love to get yours in the comments below. Please like, share, subscribe, and click that bell to stay connected to what's going on here. I do want to thank the Spirit Blade Insiders for even making this review possible for me. You can get info about the benefits of joining at patreon.com/spiritbladeproductions. Then I hope you'll join us soon over at christiangeekcentral.com as we continue to geek out and seek the truth. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. We've got a ton going on here at Spirit Blade Productions and Christian Geek Central, including our in-depth Bible study for geeks, movie, game, and other entertainment reviews or commentary, live streams, Christian geek news, original audio dramas, and tons more. And on top of all that, you can become a Spirit Blade insider with an influential voice and get access to exclusive content and rewards. It's your involvement as a patron that will keep all of this going and growing, so I want to thank you for your consideration in that. For more information, please check out our Patreon page through the link below at patreon.com/spiritbladeproductions. Thanks for listening.